No, it's probably my account.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to an amazing Saturday breakfast morning, right? Our breakfast with Ribea, Elise. I like to say nowadays Ribea. Those add onto our name sometimes is amazing. What we want to share with you all this morning is we have been enjoying our morning cup of tea. Thank you for this amazing tea. This is a Indian type of tea, yes. And it's amazing. It's almost like the English breakfast tea, but it's tasting very nice. And we're enjoying wheat bix. And we had an amazing week. Our business is going very fine. We're in the month of July and we are excited to share on our business, how well our business have done for these 3 years. And based on our opinion and based on where we find ourselves at with what Evoke business represents in season. So yeah, our online store, yes, and Stripe, we go with Stripe very much. We had what easy word, an easy word with our magazine was about the sales of it, but easy word didn't give us that. But our businessness, when you open the app and you go and check your products and you find your store. So we go with stripe.com. Yes, it's amazing. And thank you to that. To our first sales went to an email address of Xerox. And that's amazing. Our magazine, yes, it's amazing. And we're excited to share with everyone and with those who support our business. Support sometimes doesn't mean financially that you would have to support, but support sometimes means maybe an opinion. Support sometimes means, just being there with how we can share and how we feel that openness to share and to give our opinion. And that is basically us. That is basically what Ribea Elise represents in season. That is basically when we look at business owners today, we learn that we do not have to have competition. That competition is that sometimes challenges the business itself, right? It challenges what you want to do and what you represent with your business. And when you find yourself just doing what you're doing and appreciating what you do, then you find yourself in that is owning your business itself. And that is what we appreciate with our Evoke business in season. It is appreciating our own work rather than requiring someone else to tell you that they appreciate your opinion or they appreciate what you say. It is you being familiar with yourself as a person. And that's what we want to educate, because the competition on social media is like going crazy, and the room is for everyone, right? For every young business owner out there who really started their business and really find that they sometimes still have to pay rent with the funds, and the competition sometimes doesn't allow them, and sometimes critics that criticizes your opinion, not because they criticizes your opinion, but because they themselves want to have themselves in business itself. And then business owners find themselves challenging one another on social media about that. And I believe that there's really that has been structured that funds small businesses, right? That funds small women who owns businesses are being funded on social media, and the vloggers have revealed that. But that's now another country's initiative, right? And internationally the vloggers got together and they vlog on YouTube, right? And they made good funds because the funds are streaming in, and they're sometimes sharing with one another financially. And there's really that you learn that someone in the world funds young business owners, right? Funds the initiative that young women has to voice for themselves in the comfort of your very own house with your breakfast, with your cup of tea, and realizing that there's that in our generation that's a young person that sometimes also requires to pay their rent or to pay their household, to pay what they require for what they require in the household. And therefore, there's really that team of leaders in season that has funded business owners on social media. And business owners really appreciate that exactly. What we want to educate the team that really had to manage the project. It is not that you have to own the finances yourself, but we always educate, let the finances rotate. Let it rotate from business to business. It's like the marketers came in, the marketer says, let's market your Instagram page. And then I say, okay, I've made a $30 or somewhat, let me give you 10% of that $30 because that's exactly again for you. And that's how money rotates in our generation. And how we sometimes are in that we don't, if you have to hold on to the funds, you have to hold on to it, right? And if you can provide a 10% of that, you do it in a way that is going to be fine for yourself and fine for the next person that will really appreciate also that in season. So that's just literally social media and the craziness about it, and the amazingness of how funds should rotate in the world in general, how funds should rotate from household to household, how everyone should be provided for. It is never, your savings is your savings, I always say, and you are allowed to have your savings, but you are also allowed, normally those years they said that when you are in church, the church call it a 10%. Tenth, right from your financial income that has to rotate and that has to go to another household. But nowadays we've learned that 10% is maybe, yes, you're going to the store and the store once again finance and fund another household with that money. And then if there's a percentage of your savings, I always say that you can share with a country who's maybe in poverty, who maybe requires some funds of that, then I would always say then do exactly that we don't sometimes only think about ourselves in where we are at, and we feel comfortable and it's warm and it's winter and it's breakfast morning and now we are fine about it. It is how we financially educate our generation to support one another financially, because what we have belongs to everyone. And nowadays it is not that you work for goods anymore, that someone is going to give you something when you work or when you do something for them. It is that you financially, our generation is very economically driven, with very, very, very much dependent on the economical side of mankind on earth, right? And of how we manage our households, right? Our financial dependence. So in economy, I always used to love economics more than focusing on the mathematics side of secondary school, right? I always used to love focusing on not the mathematical side of financially where I'm gonna be at one day, and what job I can have when I have studied mathematics, but economically what's required of me, right? So it's having an object and you learn that the object might be worth something, right? And you add a value to that, right? You add an amount to that object. And such is business these days. It's educating our generation that part of our generation are economically driven, that financially they require funds in order to survive. And part of our generation in certain countries can survive with the plants, with the environment itself, with nature itself, with investing more time into agriculture, into having to make sure that you know what, you have a garden, you plant your veggies, you plant your greens, you plant what you can in season, and you exactly and in countries in poverty, and Africa especially, Africa can exactly live from the agricultural side of life, from the greenness of life, from farming. And that is what Africa has really stand for years. Other countries went and were more dependent on the economical side of it, and financially, how are they going to survive? And Africa has got that. That is the most amazing nature, the most amazing seasons. It gets rain in seasons, and it gets everything that's required. The only education that people in Africa needs is when certain countries gets famine and gets a certain season that's going to be challenging, right? Then where would you invest in making sure that would be your place where you harvest at, right? So looking for the best grounds, right? The best places in Africa to harvest at, right? Rather than sitting in a certain place in Africa and realizing that the option is out of the door and you're now only gonna have to be dependent on financial and that is the finances of our generation, right? And learning that some countries like the Chinese government are economically driven, right? American government economically driven, the European government, Africa is really that the environment itself provides itself, right? It provides where it's required to be. It's the greens and greens of this earth, of the amazingness of earth, right? And we appreciate exactly that. We appreciate exactly that you can make work with what you have been provided for and with what have been provided to you, right? And it's that education that the African people came to South Africa, and South Africa was amazingly, the South African government was amazingly educated now on the agricultural side of making business, right? And providing for households, right? And doing what's required for certain households. And then when the African people traveled to South Africa, I remember they came sometimes to study, they came to be employed, and the government was very focused on the agricultural side, nature itself, right? Environmentally, how can we provide without having to be dependent and without having to require that or that from a certain country, right? And then the people are now very settled in the amazingness of South Africa, and South Africa's African people are now very educated and very elegant in South Africa. And now the education requires to go to Africa's African borders itself. The education now itself requires it's African people, it's African children, everyone is now educated, and now everyone take a seat and everyone feel very calm and relaxed with where they're at. And in that season, what we have learned, we need to go and apply, and we need to go and implement in Africa itself and in countries that really requires the education that we have had, right? And for some people, it's easy to go and educate. And for other people who financially care, some people it's easy because financially they are able to travel the world and to travel to countries, right? Financially, South African people are financially fine to now maybe get a group of people from Africa, invite them to come and visit the country and train them on what the African people in South Africa has had the education and, right? And environmentally, how to make it work in circumstances that might be challenging, that the weather might be challenging in certain regions, certain time of years, and where they can really have that they can really make use of other areas of investing and of producing it, right? And that is where the one house of our generation, the one house voice of our generation is and have to be at during this season. Someone made a firm statement yesterday, and they and what I got of the statement, I was watching a YouTube show, right, of a breakfast guy, I can't remember his name, and he was firm about people being firm on the Africanness and the blackness of themselves, right, and holding on to that. And then people would question what he's saying, but what my explanation of what he's actually maybe saying is that sometimes African people can be a bit selfish, can be a bit dependent on them as the Africanness. What does Mama Universe require of us, the black people, to represent and to hold on to that and to be firm about that and to not negotiate our opinion on where we are at with our voice in our generation? And that's, he didn't say it. Sometimes they say it in a different way, right? Sometimes the Americans say it in a different way. But when he was finished discussing it, and I realized exactly what Mama Universe is trying to have the African people hold on to, right? It is that we do not say that we challenge one another when you want to involve the non-black person into the African discussion room, right? It is that we say that people have now intermarried, children have intermarried, and ourselves, our family lines are intermarried, and Africanism is natural and own to us. And sometimes it's just the skin color. And I said earlier in a discussion, many times we don't realize the innerness of that is the Europeanness of it. but the firmness of representing what Mama Universe requires the African people to hold on to and to not negotiate about is that to be sometimes be selfless, right? To sometimes hold on to themselves, and to that education is what they need to represent, is for the African people and the African people's voice in our generation. And from there, everything else will be added onto it, right? It is when we look at the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreanese, the North Korean, South Korean, Taiwanese, you will look at that, there is them representing their exact familyness. And that's what Mama Universe requires of the African people, to be firm on also. Because sometimes the Africans are required to sometimes give so much of themselves to someone else, and now they've intermarried, and now the whole room's discussion change, and it's whole discussions about, and it's whole argument sometimes about reparations. And someone mentioned that reparations is not only financially requiring you to pay for that were abusive to maybe the African people, but reparations is sometimes that reaction of change that is not gonna occur again in our generation, where African people sometimes found themselves free of that is oppression because of their skin color, right? And you can look at the wholeness of it and say, but it's impossible to be free completely of that. But it is how we educate ourselves to accept one another in the completeness of the amazingness of the colors in the universe, and of every generation that's going to represent different. And now the African people's firmness in that representation is that they went through a lot, and they don't hold on to the anger of it, but there's some things that they are firm about, and that they really do not negotiate those values, those rights, those representations of Africa itself. That is the voice of the African person itself. That is, like when you look at the Chinese and the Japanese, then they look the same. People told me once in the office and said, no, but you can see that they are different countries, people. And then that they represent familyness. And that's sometimes what Mama Universe wants the African people to hold on to, is to represent that one house, that is the familyness of our generation, that is representing its own color. And therefore, in that, we should learn to know how to listen to what are sometimes required, and how people can sometimes voice it in their own way. And with the excitement, I always get excited. The topics that they have on YouTube is very excited. It's very exciting, and we get excited about it. But the topics that they have on YouTube, yes, they call it relevant. It's valid, right? Relevant. It's current. It's in the requirement of our generation to educate that they are discussing, that young people are discussing and voicing on YouTube and social media these years and days. And what's saying that, I've mentioned just now the reparation side of it. So with the reparations, it's not only that requirement to really for other people to really get over that the easiest target of mankind and the easiest target of people to abuse on earth would now have to be your African people. It is where the African people want other nations to get over that the Africans become your most easiest target to sometimes get at, and to sometimes argue with, and to sometimes want to disrupt, right? And it is that firmness that when they say, let us not do that again, and let's implement processes also in countries that is going to have us not challenge ourselves with depriving and abusing African people more when we have arguments in our generation, right? It is when there's arguments happening, then the easiest way to go and look and to go and point the finger at is to go to the African person and say, yeah, but your ways and this and this and that, right? And when you look at the world in general, everyone's country is exactly that also. And therefore, what they mean with the reparations. It is one thing, yes, it's not only about the money of it, but it's about the education required in our generation that gives everyone an opportunity to own where they're at in our season and to own their voice and opinion. And that is also the voice and the right of the African people in general. And our African people are very firm about that. And we are very excited for our young African children. The children in Johannesburg, yes, in South Africa, they are doing very good. They are doing very, very good. So we would want them to be educated, to not hold on to what they have for themselves, but to learn to know how to educate, especially internationally and especially also African countries that finds themselves challenged and that really wants to listen to our opinion. That is now really our families that has moved from Africa. That is the same like when I look at the little child in Africa and they're enjoying the plate of, I said the other day, samp and beans. How many years have they waited for that plate of samp and beans? 2,000 years already. How many years have the circumstances in certain countries been exactly that, right? And I've mentioned before, and I used to be one of those children that when I grew up, when that plate comes to you, you appreciate it and you are just amazingly embracing that plate of sand and beans. And it's the best thing that sometimes could have ever happened to you, right? It is receiving that. And for African children that are educated, and you don't have to come out of the circumstances in order to learn how to also be there for people who sometimes require your assistance, your opinion, your education, your advice with where they are at in the countries or with what they might be challenged with in the countries, right? It is that we look at the amazing international nation and everyone wants to go to Europe and to do the next best European thing, wants to go to America and to be the next best African American. Everyone wants to exactly design the amazingness that the Chinese, Japanese countries have done. But it's now our season to learn that while we are all wanting to own all of that there's still houses that requires the education. Rather than us now educated running up financially, we are able to educate in Africa, and Africa is still waiting, and we also still actually want the next best, to be the next best Japanese car designer, or the next best European what celebrity, or the African American celebrity now in the house. It is all of those amazingnesses and all the amazing colors that everyone can do. But let us not forget about the circumstances in the world that requires our attention much more. It is where I had to say what would be best for me to do in this season. Would it be best for me to enjoy an amazing vacation and have the finances? Or would it be best for me to educate where I'm required and that someone else might press play on the video and someone else might make a decision in a parliamentary house that would be better for the whole country, right? It is that we don't always financially require the finances to voice and to give our opinion on how we can restructure our countries in a better way and in a non-oppressive way. It is that YouTube is there. We make voice and work of what we can on our YouTube pages, and we do exactly that amazingness, and on our social media pages, and we exactly do that. We can eat our porridge after that. After this discussion. So those are the amazingnesses of our educations and of how we can color nowadays with our social media businesses, and how we can educate with where we are at and with what we can educate and advise on. And if we can financially invite people from certain countries to come for training in South Africa, or African people that can travel to Africa to go and train in certain countries that they have been educated about. It is not that difficult to learn that sometimes people just need to look around, or people just need to to find way to listen to where they are required to invest and to produce at, right? So in Africa, when you look at a certain country and a certain region where there's famine once a year, where there's drought once a year, where there's rain, right, where the rain floods houses once a year, then you look at a different region in Africa of where young people can invest their time in and build those certain countries to assist countries that sometimes are abused and that sometimes go through oppression, and to assist countries that sometimes go through environmental challenges also, right? It is how can the African people sit and discuss the matter, and how can they make work with assisting the government, right? It is that we don't look at our government and say that they're uneducated. No, it is that we look at our government and we learn that our government our parents have sent us to go and get the education so that we can give the advice. Our parents are there to make the firm decisions of the parenting requirement of the house itself, right? But it is our educations and our upbringings and how we can then also invest in our own countries. And we're only mentioning Africa, and there's so much other poverty countries that also requires the same education. But I always say, when you start at your house and when you get your house ready, then you get to where you are required to be at. And people probably knew that I'm going to have this discussion, and then they messed our whole house up in Paarl community, right? The electricity went off, the water went off, and it was mid-2020. And the electricity went off mid-2020 while I was on vacation. And it was whole craziness, right, of getting your house in order. And our house has always been that I invest my finances in. I sit in New Zealand and I call people and I say, okay, I want to order this, paint the house, clean the house once a week or once a month. And that used to be me, right? And then in 2020, I went on vacation, and the vacation went crazy, and I was unemployed, and there was half of the year, and the electricity went up, and the electricity is still up, right? And now my sister Antoinette can financially support that, and she is now financially there to financially support the brothers so that they are fine with what they might be challenged at in the house, because it's her mama's house, right? And you want to look after your mama's house, right? So yeah, we have been challenged a lot, and even if you have been challenged and your Africa looks like Africa and people tell you, but who are you to give an opinion if your house looks like that? Then you don't go and sit down because of that. Because remember, people create an environment sometimes in this world so that they can sometimes keep you at that, and then they want to say, but now they have financially done this or that amazing thing. And that's why we educate, do not be deprived of where we are required to be at with voicing and representing ourselves in the amazingness of this generation. And therefore, no one should feel abused and oppressed to not want to do that, because the environment was exactly created so that African people cannot excel in the amazingness of the Africanness, of the blackness of their seed in our generation, in their voice in our generation. So yeah, it is appreciating the completeness of your voice and representing you and advocating for you, and not going to sit down because people's opinions are now this or that. People's opinions are always gotta be that, because sometimes people want to hold on to owning all the businesses in the world. Sometimes only a certain family line wants to hold on to owning that and that. And in Africa, that part of that part of the international nation that wants to hold on, and it shouldn't be Ribea, and it shouldn't be Mama Anna's household, and it shouldn't be from this family, is happening even in the African community. But while these discussions are happening, it's important to own where we are at, to be firm with owning your seat, and to represent and advocate exactly for you, and to not have someone else explain you with how they want to explain you to the world, but with voicing where you are at, and with being honest to yourself, right? Representing you, being firm about it, not negotiating where you find yourself at in season, and exactly voicing and educating that in the amazingness of our generation. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say this morning with our breakfast morning, and what I want us to really think about and to discuss really in the meetings this season, and in what we can discuss in our generation this season. And that is it for me today. Have an amazing Saturday further.